What's up, people? I am back for another video. Today, I am reviewing Hellraiser 5 Inferno, and this isn't even a Hellraiser movie. Like, let's just start from the rip. This is basically just some shitty early 2000s detective movie, because this was at that time, Heat was out. You had, like, a lot of, like, especially post, like, 7, you had a lot of like just detective movies, and this was Miramax, so Miramax was making a lot of those movies. So they're like, you know what, this one isn't gonna do well because even just it's not just a bad Hellraiser movie. I'd say this is just a bad movie in general because like it is boring. But anyway, before I fully get into it, you could tell Miramax or were like, okay, we need to do something. So they're like, let's just call it a Hellraiser movie and throw in some Cenobites and some Doug Bradley, who, like, I love Doug Bradley. Love him as Pinhead. Even in, like, up until this point, up to 4, I actually really like Doug Bradley in all those movies. He was not good in this. One, the costume looked horrible. Because I guess I didn't know, but this was straight to DVD. It makes sense why the fucking costume looks so bad, because they barely put any work into like the makeup. The only real design, it just looks weird. These, like, I'm gonna call them Cenobite hookers that you see like in the beginning of the movie and the way they find the box is just so random. The main character Joseph Thorne, who he's just some bullshit detective who he's a corrupt cop. He cheats on his wife, and he's trying to solve these murders from the engineer, which is someone fucking knows. And he's seeing a psychiatrist. I think he's a psychiatrist. I could be fucking wrong. I'm gonna be honest. At this point in the movie, I was just out. I'm like this the whole time, man. I'm just like, can we get going? At least Hellraiser 4, the parts in space were pretty bad, but at least that was a Hellraiser movie. Even in the parts where, because at least that movie was about like telling you the origin story of like the box and stuff like that. The way they find the box is just fucking random. He finds it at a murder scene. Like, it's so, and the couple of references here and there, and then there's like a scene where he finds like his wife and daughter on like the rack that you see in the previous movies. And then, yeah, Pinhead shows up in the end. And the only, I guess, cool scene I'll say is the end. And not just because the movie's over, but because I'll admit, you could somewhat tell they put some work where you see Joseph get tortured basically for his sins, and like the hooks are like all pulling his face. I thought that looked cool, but the rest of the movie was just boring. Like, nothing really happens besides he's trying to solve these murders, and he's a corrupt cop, and that's it. That's really it, man. This is just some shit. That's like why I'm like, even it's a bad movie. It's not just a bad Hellraiser. You could tell the studio this was supposed to be something else, and they're just like, just throw in like fucking Cenobites. And Doug Bradley just didn't do it for me in this movie. Not just like the costume was bad. I didn't feel like the dialogue was even there, or he didn't have the presence he had in the other 4 films. And it's just, yeah. If from what I'm hearing, at least Kirsty comes back in the next one. So at least there's a chance that maybe we can kind of get back to at least somewhat of a Hellraiser film. Because I hear basically from here on out, they're basically horrible. But just give me something fun at least. Because this was just bad, man. Its biggest crime, it was boring. Like, nothing was happening. You're just fucking following the shitty cop. That's it. that's the movie, and it's so bad, man. I'd almost say this movie is false advertising. It's not a Hellraiser movie. I don't even know why they even called it Inferno. Like, I don't even think there's like anything to do with fire even in the movie. So like, I don't even know why they call it Inferno. At least Bloodline, the title was justified because they're going through the different versions of I can't think of his name now, but the main guy from the last film, and it was like different version throughout different decades. So that at least the title made sense. Title doesn't, and then 3 Hell on Earth because all the Cenobites come to Earth, and you have like this big attack. So the titles made sense for those movies. The titles don't make sense for this one. Why is it called Inferno? Whatever. You could tell he thought it just sounded good. I wouldn't even be surprised if the film was just called Inferno and they just put Hellraiser in front of it. I could see that probably the original script for whatever this was called was just called Inferno. And yeah, this was horrible, man. Don't watch it. I'd honestly it's a waste of time. There's nothing in here. Like, Doug Bradley can't even save this piece of shit. So hopefully maybe 6 will be slightly better. Just be better than this. So if I were to give it out of 10, probably a 4, 3, like between those two, just because this has nothing to do with Hellraiser. This is just, and then like I said, when you're just boring, and it feels, even though like this movie's only like an hour and like it's pretty short. It's only like an hour and 30 or something like that. But you make me feel like I'm watching this for like 3 hours. It felt like it's like agony. It just drags its pace terribly. It's cheap looking. I've seen straight to DVD movies that look better. Like, so not all, just because it's straight to DVD or straight to video. There's some straight to video movies that look good still. Like, 'cause let's be honest here. Even like the first few Hellraisers, not like the effects were that crazy. So, yeah, don't watch this piece of shit. So, tomorrow I will be reviewing Shrek the Third, which I can't wait for that because I really am loving the Shrek movie, especially on rewatch. I don't really remember 3. I'm kind of remembering Prince Charming. I think I remember him being like the main villain for that one. So it was cool that he came back, but I don't really remember much else from it. So we'll be rewatching that tomorrow. Today, I should have mentioned this earlier, but I watched Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, the Pooh horror movie. It's not bad. It's okay. Objectively, it's not good. I'll sit here and say, I'm not going to sit here and say it's objectively good. No. But I had fun with it. It's basically like Friday the 13th, but with Winnie the Pooh. I know I've seen some reviews where they didn't like that it took itself too seriously, but I kind of did. It's like they played it like a horror movie. And then I think and it actually is much better than the main one. So I'll be reviewing that on Sunday. I actually might watch it again. Probably not in theaters though, but I might watch it again. And yeah, so that's probably my next few reviews for the next few days. But let's get to reviewing this dog shit entry in the Hellraiser franchise. So I don't even really remember where this movie starts. It just kind of starts. It's one of those movies where where it opens, but you don't really remember how it opens. It just kind of starts. So we meet Joseph. I don't remember his last name, but I think Burke. I think is his last name, but he's our main character. He's this corrupt LA. I think it's LA detective who basically he's a piece of shit. Like, that's the premise of the movie. And he's cheating on his wife. He I think he takes money. He sleaze, like all that on while he's out, I guess, doing a murder investigation because he's hunting this killer called the Engineer, and he's seeing like a therapist. I think it's a therapist, actually, not a psychiatrist. Who basically is like trying to help him out, which I just don't care. I was just, even like the start of the movie, I'm just, what am I watching? I'm like, this just, there's nothing here. Because at least Hellraiser 3 or 4, sorry, even though there's some of it in space, but at least it starts out like a Hellraiser film. You have references to the box and, and all this. They don't have that in this. And I'm mentioning this again just because it's so bad how they just introduced the box in this movie. It's just, oh, it's at a murder scene randomly. And then he opens it. He sees some Cenobite hookers. Which, I'll admit, the makeup for them looked good, but that's going to be the thumbnail for this video. But it's just, they're like the only real Cenobites you see, and then like the rest of the film, it's just some shitty detective film. He's like arguing with his partner. The killer is starting to kill like his people he's working with. I'm like, yeah, this definitely was just another film they were doing. Because, like I mentioned earlier, like 7, post 7, there was a lot of like just detective movies out. So this was just gonna be another one, but they felt like it wasn't gonna do well. So that's why they just tied Hellraiser to it. And it's so lazy. Because the way they just, that's not how you introduce at least the box was introduced well, done well in those first 2 films. And even in the third one, where they reintroduced it, it was done better. Even in the 4th film, like, this one, it's just so lazy. Oh, it's just at a murder, happens to be at a murder scene, and no explanation how it got there, or whatever. So, yeah, he opens it, we get Cenobite shit, but it was, the couple times we do see Pinhead, he just doesn't do it for me. Because Doug Bradley, up until this point, carries these movies. Like, he has this presence about him. They just didn't put any work to it. Like, even for a straight-to-video movie. And yeah, just most of the film is just... That's why I know this review's going to be probably a bit short. But just, there's not a lot to talk about. In terms of, like, at least 4, there was the different eras. You could kind of go into that. And, the origin of the box, it was a prequel and a sequel, and they've done that well. This is just, I don't even know if it's not really a Hellraiser sequel. At all. Like, they don't really explain why Pinhead's back. Either. This one is just so dull. It's so... The character of Burke, or Joseph, I'm just going to call him Joseph, he is so boring. Because he's just your prototypical sleazy cop, and that's all he was made to be. There was no actual character to him. Even the club owner from the last film, even though he was kind of just made to be an asshole character, but they did that better in that movie. In this, he's just bad because... And you're just supposed to hate him. And they don't... And then his wife's not even a factor in the movie. She's barely in it. And the scenes they have together just... No. The acting in general is pretty bad. His partner is over the top. This is just a nondescript movie because there's not a lot that happens. Like, there really isn't. That's why I'm sorry. Like, I'm not really going into it. Like, there's just not a lot to talk about. Okay, so I'm just going to jump to the end, where it's revealed his therapist the entire time was Pinhead. Whatever. And yeah, I'm going to mention again, the costume just did not look good. It looked really cheap. Even in the 4th film, the costume looked decent. I think the first 3 is where the costume looks really good. But I thought it looked still fine in the fourth one, and it just uh it just didn't look good. Especially the fucking all it okay. The like gown part, like the lower part of the costume didn't actually look horrible. It's the fucking face mask with the pins. You couldn't even tell where the pins were at times, and you Doug Bradley just didn't. I don't know if he just phoned it in. I felt like he phoned it in a little bit, and I don't blame him either. Though he probably was just like, "Hey, this is a dog shit movie. Why phone it in? There's no reason." He probably saw the script and was like, "There's nothing to work with," because he probably knows. Probably even at the time, I'm wondering if he knew that like this wasn't originally a Hellraiser movie. Because it's like there's nothing for Pinhead to really work with in this movie. He doesn't bounce off of. Joseph has one scene with him. Even though, yeah, I guess he was the therapist the entire time. But I guess Pinhead can just shapeshift now. Okay. And hide as a human. Alright. That's new. I'm going to be honest, I wouldn't inherently be against that if you at least explained how he can do it. This is just, he has it now. So, he ends up torturing Joseph for the rest of his life. And then there's a scenario he looks in where there's like, his life's normal, but then, yeah, it comes back, he's being tortured. I'll admit the scene with the hooks was kind of cool. It didn't look as good as like the other films, but I'm like, okay, this is something, you know? But man, this movie is horrible. I really don't understand what Miramax is thinking with this. You would have been better off just releasing that, because what they had was just, a shitty detective movie. I'd almost say that it makes sense why this is direct to DVD or video. It just doesn't make sense, man. It's such a waste of Doug Bradley. You know, he's such an iconic. I do put him up there like the Michael Myers and Jasons and the Freddys. And it's sad because I really think Hellraiser is such an interesting concept, and I don't understand why they don't. It's like Jeepers Creepers too. It's like, why don't these franchises have such like potential, but they don't take it seriously? I think it's like, it's weird because this was 2000. This is the same time as when, like, we're in that I guess some way you can call it slasher resurgence, where it was after Scream. You had a lot of these post-Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer slashers. Happy they didn't at least go that route with Hellraiser. But I'd almost say maybe that would have been something compared to this. This was just a bad detective movie. Really was. Joseph's such a flat character. You don't care. I was just bored the whole time, man. I was such a waste. Such a waste of this movie. It's one of those cases like, you wasted your time. Everybody wasted their time. The makeup people wasted their time doing the makeup for this. The director wasted his time directing. Whoever wrote this, this should have just never happened. This should be the case, like a movie that should never exist. Because this was just, I don't understand why you didn't just take, because Hellraiser's such a good concept. I really think it's, the idea of the box, which they didn't even give a shit about in this movie. It's just gonna be in some dude's house. And they probably wrote that in just last second, because they probably originally was just gonna be a scene where he finds like a body. Fuck, man. And there's really no other characters besides like his detective friend, his, partner, and then his like wife, I guess. And then that's really it. There's not a lot of, the therapist who's really Pinhead. That's why I didn't initially mention him. But yeah, 3 out of 10. I'm not giving it a 4-3. This is awful. This is bin territory. I think you wasted such a waste of a good IP. So anyway, It's really all I can say. This is awful. This is dog shit. That's all I can just call it all the names. So anyway, at least tomorrow I'm gonna potentially, because I remember liking Shrek 3 at the time, or Shrek the Third. So I'm hoping maybe I'll enjoy it again. So, but yeah, we'll get to that tomorrow. We'll talk about Pooh, and in a world where I'll say Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is better than this movie. So, anyway, at least that movie was intended to be written that way compared to this. This was a case of clearly this was another script they just repurposed, in a very bad repurposing at that. Because there's sometimes scripts that end up getting repurposed that work. Like District 9. This is a big one. That was originally supposed to be like a Halo movie. That was like, I remember hearing that story the first time. Like, yeah, it was originally supposed to be like a Halo movie we were gonna get. But then it got canned, so they repurposed it, and that's why we got District 9. But it was done better. That's how you repurpose a script. This is, and granted, that was way later in time, but still, it's like, holy shit, man. This is sad. This movie is just the biggest crime. It is boring as fuck. You don't give a fuck. It's just, you just want it to end. And it's like the longest hour and a half I've ever seen. It's like an hour and a half should not be this long. But anyway, I'll talk to y'all tomorrow. But fuck Joe Biden.